Welcome back to another episode of Taste and Drink with me, John O'Hersey. Now, I apologise, it's been a little while between shows. However, I've been in France for a month, and then it's taken me a few weeks to catch up on things in the warehouse and with day-to-day duties. But we were across on a buying trip, tasting through the 22s, the 23s, and here and there would have a little glimpse at the 24s. So I just thought I'd just talk through the vintages and just give a bit of a sort of a summation on each. Now, 22s we're fairly well versed with, and we're seeing that a lot of our 22s from our producers land now. Now, 22 like 20 and 19 and 18 was really quite warm, but it somehow managed to retain balance and purity. Now the reds have a beautiful colour and they're ripe, but they retain a transparency and a purity, particularly even in the visual sort of colouring of the wine. Now 23 was actually cooler overall, but they had two severe heat spells, one in August and one over the harvest. And some people waited until after that second spell. Well, a few people, most people sort of picked in the middle, but for those that picked before it, and in our stables, those particularly Alain Charvy and Domaine Michel Nilon, when I was across there for harvest, that had already finished. People that picked well and truly before, it really does look like a completely classic vintage. There's no sort of yellow florals to the wines. It's all very sort of white floral and citrus and very fresh. For those that picked sort of towards the start of the heat wave, you can sort of see a little bit more of a sort of a round nature and some yellow florals coming through. And then for those that picked later, you can see that they're markedly touched. So what are the three wines that we're seeing from 23? We're seeing those that completely missed the heat wave, they picked earlier. The wines are completely fresh, they're classic. They're a bit more, say, like 2017. Then we're seeing wines that have definitely been sort of, you can tell that they're from a classic vintage, but those few days around that 40 degrees really has just dropped the acidity out. They're still sort of quite fresh because they didn't ripen anymore during those sort of 40 degree days, but the acidity dropped. So they're not sort of flamboyant, but they do sort of lack a little bit of acidity, but you can tell that they're still sort of wines of class. And then there's wines that you can sort of see are quite sort of obviously touched by the sun. They're yellow fruit, yellow florals, a little bit rounder. Some of them have been adulterated with a little bit of acidity, which they're legally allowed to do now. And they're the sort of the three wines that we're seeing. So, and the other thing is you'll see not all producers, you know, their whole lineup is one particular style, because obviously you've got a picking team and you choose to pick certain vineyards first. So they, you know, some producers really sort of shone in particular vineyards, and then in other vineyards you would sort of start to see those sort of riper characteristics. A really good example of that is Domaine Sylvain, Longuereau and Saint-Aubin. You know, their Saint-Aubins were very pure, very sort of white floral, sort of very sort of focused. And then the Chassagne Montrachet, which I dare say they pick a little bit later, you know, you could see a little bit more sort of flesh and definitely a little bit more influenced by the sun. Now, 2024 is quite interesting because if you ever ask a producer in Burgundy or anywhere really around the world how was harvest, they're not necessarily talking about quality. They're talking about yield, and they're talking about how difficult it was for them. 24, like 21, was absolutely devastating, extraordinarily low yields, very, very difficult, lots of disease, lots of pressure, far worse in the Côte de Nuits for Pinot Noir than it was for Chardonnay in the Côte de Beaune. But what a lot of people aren't saying, so you know, have the conversation. How's 24? You know, difficult, yes. How's the quality? And they'll turn around even after sort of speaking about how sort of how much of a catastrophe it was. They say, oh yeah, the wines are absolutely beautiful. They're like, from what I've seen, from what I've tasted, and from what I've sort of talked about, there's going to be some stylistic similarities with 21. Now 21 was unusual because it was a very cool year, but it didn't actually have that much acidity. So while they're fresh, they don't necessarily have that sort of straight line of acidity and that sort of the acidity that imposes sort of structure and you know, sort of holds it in the mouth in a particular way. 24 will have that. And for those, no, don't get me wrong, there will be some awful 24s, but there will be some absolutely sensational 24s. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It was a difficult vintage, and a lot of producers will say that, but it doesn't mean that the wines are going to be poor. All in all, it's actually really quite exciting. If you have a blousy 23 that's lacking acidity or full of yellow fruits, don't panic. Just do a little bit of research prior. You'll pick it up in people's tasting notes very easily. You know, even those that sort of write notes in a positive manner, you'll be able to tell which ones you'll like and which ones you don't, because there'll either be white florals or yellow florals, or sort of yellow sort of orchard fruit, and that means it's sort of bigger and richer. But then again, you might have those, but then they'll talk about minerality and acidity. You know, if you've got both of those, yeah, you can make a nice wine. It's going to be flavoursome, but at least you've got that freshness. And then you'll quickly be able to tell those that that have got that sort of, you know, sort of sun-kissed nature, but don't have the acidity. And they're the ones you're probably got to be wary of. Anyway, that was a very above board view. In the next couple of days, we'll come back on and we'll talk about restaurants and wine bars and who's doing what over there at the moment, because it is important to keep up to date. Yes, all the best and speak soon.